Welcome to Capital Conquest, the podcast, where we take an in-depth look at the influencers who have made and who continue to make Capital Conquest the extraordinary martial arts event that it is. My name is Scott Campsell, and today Hanshi John Tarian and I speak with 7th degree Jiu-Jitsu black belt and retired police officer Kyoshi Bernard Ladouceur. Kyoshi is one of Hanshi Tarian's most senior instructors and has been practicing martial arts since 1971. In this episode, we talk with Kyoshi about the differences between learning martial arts techniques in a dojo compared to using them to arrest a subject. We also talk a little bit about training while aging and what it's like for the father of champions to be learning with and learning from his sons. Ever ask yourself whether your martial arts style would work in a real-life situation? Join us as we ask Kyoshi Bernard Ladouceur.
Kyoshi Bernard Ladouceur is, and I'm proud to say that he's one of my senior black belts, one of the top instructors that I've ever produced in the last 60 years or 55 years, I should say. He started with me at the age of 16. So I'm going to ask Bernie to do his own introduction as far as background in martial arts and also as a police officer and what he's accomplished there in relating to the martial arts. Kyoshi, you want to give us a little bit about your background, please?
Absolutely. By the way, great to see you again, Shan Scott, and Hanshi, always a pleasure. As Hanshi indicated, I started early 1972, late 71, at the age of 16 with back then Sensei John Tarian. Later on in life, I went on to become a police officer, and it was very, very nice to have the martial arts background handy because back then, anybody that had martial arts experience became the new self-defense instructor. So if it was a judo guy or karate guy, or in my case, it was a jiu-jitsu guy, it was additional duties. And it was nice because you sort of went with the martial arts background until you found out that what we do in martial arts isn't necessarily what we should be doing in law enforcement. I enjoyed a 32-year career in policing, did not spend my entire career teaching self-defense or what is now known as defensive tactics, but was a sort of a trainer for the trainers. We quickly learned early in my career that we couldn't break wrists and destroy kneecaps and ankles and bony parts and everything. So it actually went from self-defense training to, like I mentioned, defensive tactics. Defensive tactics was a lot more advanced in the United States because civil liability and civil litigation is far advanced than it was here in Canada. So they learned a long time ago that if you want to continue doing the old ways of law enforcement, it was very costly. Everybody was getting sued, police departments, police officers, people were losing their careers, their livelihoods. So I was one of the first Canadian police officers to get sent down there with special training. And back then it was PPCT. They were the leaders in law enforcement training. And about 12 of us in Canada became staff or instructor trainers for PPCT. And it allowed us to be farmed out to other agencies and develop a training program, which was a precursor to what we now have, the use of force continuum or the wheel, whatever it's called now. I've been retired now for 12 years, but it was handy to have. And it was able to make sure that the force that was used by law enforcement was proportionate to the resistance being encountered. It made things a lot more defendable in court. So having the martial arts background was extremely beneficial, but getting that additional training and being able to explain what you did, why you did, and the anticipated results was very nice to have in court as well.
You know, Bernie, this brings me to a question now that the martial arts training is fantastic. And when I started to train in the 60s, you trained to give one blow. And one blow was not for competition. You got to put that one blow in. And normally, if you had that power behind it, that should do it sometimes. And I say sometimes. Then martial arts became a style. Martial arts became a fantastic way of getting in shape and learning how to defend yourself, and more techniques were added. Martial arts is great. It will still help you in self-defense in more ways than one. How does the police tactic training, I know you covered about the legal aspect of it, but let's say now that you want to apply a control on somebody. Like if you go in jiu-jitsu and we show a control to our people, it's great. They have a willing partner to train with. But then you go outside, and I'm not going to say how you call the perp or something like that, but then you got a badass that you need to put in the car or to take out and to lock up. Take it from there. What is the big difference from there?
Yeah, the big difference that I quickly found was in the dojo, it's ideally situational. You have a willing partner, like you mentioned. However, reality isn't always quite as easy. And I remember as a young policeman, I'd go back to the dojo and say, that technique, sensei? Yeah, no good. And he would often respond with, is it technique or is it the technician? But a lot of what we do in martial arts is very complex. And what we found in law enforcement is you don't have the time to get fancy. You really, really have to be effective. It has to be based on gross motor skills. Obviously, someone with a lot of training who's been doing it for years and years and decades will have more facility with it. But then you have the police officer that's never been in a school fight or an altercation or in a dojo or whatever. And then they're called upon because they wear the uniform to deal with a situation. In situations, they're not all the same. We'll go to a call and it's a routine call. There is no such thing as a routine call because they all have the potential of going from bad to worse. And that's the other thing too. Policemen very seldom get called to birthday parties. It's always problems. And when we get there, we have to deal with that problem. So it's a question of analyzing, and then based on set of circumstances and grounds that you would form, then you have to pass to the act. And most acts would not be physical if people would just comply with the request, whether it be, okay, stop beating up on your wife. No, I'll be with you in a second. And he keeps on thumping. So at some point you have to make a decision. But also the force that is used has to be proportional. So if you try and get fancy, it very seldom works. If you keep it simple, if it's based on gross motor skills and you have a targeted area that, you have a pre-planned response to whatever activity is going on. If you go into a situation without a game plan, you'll be trying to get fancy. And the other reality too is in the dojo, it's very tough to add the stress level factor because again, it's compliant. You have a sensei walking around and telling you, take it easy, don't get too rough, blah, blah, blah. And you know that the outcome is whatever you will do to me, I get to do to you. But in real life, it doesn't work that way. If you zig when you should have zagged, you're going to miss the best part of the confrontation. And that's a very unfortunate reality. So you have to have a game plan. If things are going south and you can read the body language and the situational and you have awareness, okay, well, obviously he or she is not complying and I'm going to have to control the subject or handcuff the subject. Again, sir, you're going to have to turn around and I'll have to apply the cuffs. You don't always get compliance. In fact, they say, oh yeah, let's see you do that. At some point, you have to have a game plan. And whether you try and do it verbally, if you can de-escalate it, that's fine. That doesn't always work. When it doesn't work, what is going to be your technique? Well, everybody should have a few techniques ready to go in their heads. And I know if I have to go in and control a subject, I pretty well know what I have to do to get that person in a position where he or she will be complying whether they like it or not. Keeping it simple, base it on gross motor skills, nothing too fancy, because the unknown factor is the element of stress. And dealing with stress, we see that in black belt gradings. We try to induce stress to see how they deal with that, because in the dojo, once you go outside, when push comes to shove, that stress factor comes in and it's a different ballgame. It doesn't matter how high you can kick, how high you can jump. It's basically how fast you can run and get out of there.
Find it harder to have a smaller list of techniques then, if you're as opposed to a huge curriculum that you study on a regular basis?
The curriculum is good because it gives you a good basis, but I'm saying you should have a handful of techniques that have been proven to you by you. Okay, I know they work. Believe me, I will never, ever enter a control section with a hook kick. First of all, I can't kick. Secondly, it doesn't make sense to lift a leg when you need both of them to stand up. It's like taking one of the legs off a tripod. We're not meant to be that way. I mean, in competition, it's a whole different ballgame. In a controlled environment, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's like you mentioned earlier, too. When you train people from white belt to black belt, you know that they're going to be with you for several years. So you've got time. You're going to see them 2-3 times a week, and then plus seminars, and then plus camps and training. Police officers, they go and they get minimum training. It's like I knew a police officer, they had to go to the shooting range at least once a year. And he'd go bang, 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 bye. Because he hated to shoot guns. Well, if ever he had to use his gun, he would have been in trouble because it's minor, right? So Now, yes, the police work, Bernie, you were great at it. And there's stories I can't talk about because I don't think we need to know all of the stories. But I tell you that you've proved that police tactics were great for your job when it was needed, warranted. In the martial arts side, your father trained at Terrien Jiu-Jitsu with me to orange belt. May he rest in peace. You've got three boys. The three of them are black belts. You own two schools. The family owns two schools on the Quebec side. And your boys are advanced in martial arts. Bobby is one of the best jiu-jitsu guys we've got. He's also in BJJ and then Terrien Jiu-Jitsu. And Ben, who's a fifth dan in jiu-jitsu, if I'm correct, and he's also a world amateur kickboxing champion. So when you speak about the Ladouceur family, you speak about jiu-jitsu, you speak about martial arts, you speak about kickboxing, you speak about police tactics. A lot of people don't know how that is. How is that in the family where everybody is a top-notch and you are at the top of your profession and so are your boys? How does it feel when you walk in and you train? Because I've seen you as a father with your boys. I've seen you as a teacher with your boys. And I've also seen you train under your boys. So let's talk about families in the martial arts. Some do it for have something to do, and others, it becomes a career in a lifetime.
Well, I'll go back to, the boys started that very young because whether they liked it or not, that's what I did. And if I wanted to travel to Europe to conventions or whatever, it would be a family trip. They started when they were, Bobby was 4 and Ben was 6. And this year they'll be 45 and 43. So they've been doing it for a while. And my youngest one started a little later. But again, like you said, they're all very, very competent martial artists. The two oldest ones decided to make a living doing that. And when they graduated from university, let's open up a dojo. Well, training together was always nice. I had a full-time job, and in 2000, when we opened up a dojo, I sort of scratched my head saying, well, whenever I went to Sensei Terrien's dojo, all I had to do is bring a gym bag, have a class plan, teach a class, train a bit, and then go home. Didn't have to sell a contract, pay the rent, do anything. This was a very challenging adventure for us, but well worthwhile. It was very much a family thing, the training and the teaching. And even though we had a school, we maintained the fact that you have to keep on training as well. So we would also train together and develop class plans. And even though the curriculum was already there, it's not just teaching the technique. It's the presentation of the technique, creating the need for the technique. And that's what sort of sets us above a lot of places, because a class becomes very interesting. It has a purpose. It has a theme. And we developed that type of approach to it. And proud to say my boys are extremely gifted instructors, even from the youngest, JF. And he was probably the best instructor I had at the dojo. He was better than Ben, better than Bobby, because he was younger and he had the kids program and he can communicate. As we get older, it's not as much fun to teach the kids because we don't have the same patience. I know, I'm speaking for myself. I don't have the same mobility as I had 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We have aches and pains. What we do is a tough sport. It's a tough hobby. It's a tough livelihood, teaching martial arts. Because if you're not hurting, then you haven't trained. And every class will give you a new souvenir. Oh, God, I woke up, I tweaked this muscle, I did that. And I see a smiling Scott. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not hurting, it's because you're not training. And so I'm proud to say that for over 50 years, I wake up every morning and I'm hurting like a son of a bitch. Sorry. But that's a good thing. And over the years, I've had limitations for jiu-jitsu. I've had neck surgery. And I was a very strong component of jiu-jitsu and this BJJ thing and this kickboxing thing, whatever, because I was a jiu-jitsu guy. But when I got my neck surgery, gone was the grappling, gone was the ability to get into a neck crank or whatever. So I said, well, it doesn't end there. So I became a kickboxing student. And that's what you're saying, Angie, about I train under my son, Ben. And Bobby's also an awesome kickboxer instructor as well. So it was nice to bring my gym bag and become a student again. And I fell in love with being a student. Forget this, prepare the class and teach a class. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy much more going there and training, and I get a better benefit out of it. And it's improved my movement techniques. It's given me different ways of approaching our curriculum. It's developed me even into a better instructor, I find, based on continuing training. Last week, I went 4 times to Ben's classes And I'm not ashamed to tell you, I am still sore. and and will continue to do that till because I've been away for 3 months, but I was doing some of it via Zoom anyways, but not what I should have been doing because golf got in the way. But anyways, that's a whole other story.
So Bernie, in closing, we just have about a minute or two. You've got advice to our listener who wants to start martial arts, maybe at an older age. You know, we all know what we should introduce martial arts to every kids. And for me, martial arts should be taught in all the grade schools from grade 1 to grade 8. And I think we'd have a better world for it. You know, that's why our schools are so progressively moving forward. And there's a big growth because there's a need for it. But for somebody that is past their prime or somebody that is over 21, let's just say, any advice for them?
Absolutely. I mean, Hanshi, we started in the day, like you had already had your school, but we started with the Bruce Lee craze. And there was a martial arts school open every corner. And we wanted to learn how to fight. Today's society is not like that. Today is more fitness oriented. So the stuff we were being taught way back when, we can't teach that today. And thank God for that. I mean, you would go to school with a black eye or a broken nose, and that was sort of like a Medal of Honor. Today, you can't send someone with a twisted wrist or anything like that. People are professionals, and whether they go to school, whether they work, they come because they want to get into shape. And we found that with the pandemic as well. People will continue to invest in themselves. So if you want to take a sport and get something out of it, martial arts will give it to you, whether it be karate, whether it be jiu-jitsu, whether it be kickboxing. Fitness is a component of that. We have geared much more towards fitness and well-being than to learning how to fight. That's a byproduct of it, and that's nice to have too. But we're not the same society we were back 30, 40, 50 years ago. Things have changed. We don't settle our disputes in a parking lot anymore. And if we do, well, it's late at night or early in the morning. But that being said, martial arts is a great vehicle. It gets you moving. When you're older in life, we've adapted too. People come in, and if they're over 35, 40, 45, they don't do the same slam bam stuff as the young kids do, or the young adults, or people in their prime. We modify, we adapt, and they get a lot of fun out of it, because you get somebody who's over 200 pounds getting slammed and he's 50 years old, he ain't getting up as fast, or she's not getting up as fast, and you want them to come back to the dojo. Let's face it, it's a great sport to practice, but it's also a great business if it's run properly, and we have to keep that in mind as well. It's our livelihoods.
So would people want to get in touch with the famous Kyoshi Bernard Ladouceur or the fine Ladouceur family? How do they get in touch with you guys?
Well, tell them to talk to their neighbors, because everybody's heard of us. But the reality of it, we have two locations, one at 340 Maloney Boulevard in Gatineau, the other one at 569 St. Joseph Boulevard in Gatineau, the old hall. And it's info@artmartialsgatineau.com is our email address. Phone number is 819-663-5777.
And if you lost that or you can't get a hold of that, contact me and I'll guarantee I'll put you in touch with the masters.
Well, that was going to be my first thing. Call Hanshi Terrien, because other than Santa Claus, you're probably the second most popular person on this earth today.
Well, I feel like Santa got to go away for a year just to recuperate. Bernie, I love you, my friend, and keep up the good work to you and the family, and keep passing it forward.
Perfect.
See you next time.
A pleasure. And tough questions. Thank God I was prepared.
Bye-bye,
Take care, brother.
Great to see you, sir. Capital Conquest will be happening November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2023. For more information, you can go to our website at www.capitalconquest.org or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/capitalconquestwkf. This has been a Capsule Broadcasting production. I have to admit, I'm feeling a little sad now for all of the cops that don't get called to birthday parties.